Welcome to my YouTube channel, where today I'm about to reveal something that might completely change the way you look at the spare change sitting in your drawer, your car's cup holder, or that old coin jar collecting dust in your closet. Because what if I told you that one simple quarter from 1978 could be worth an absolutely staggering $300 million? Yes, you heard that right. $300 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the street. And before you think this is just another coin fantasy, let me tell you that the 1978 quarter dollar from the USA has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world, with collectors, investors, and treasure hunters desperately searching through millions of quarters hoping to find this exact coin. And the reason why is so fascinating that once you understand it, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. Now, the story of the 1978 quarter begins in an era when America was recovering from economic turbulence. Disco was dominating the airwaves, and the United States Mint was producing millions upon millions of quarters to meet the demands of everyday commerce. But something extraordinary happened during this production run, something that the Mint didn't catch until it was far too late, and by then, these special quarters had already slipped into circulation, mixing invisibly with ordinary coins, waiting to be discovered by someone lucky enough or knowledgeable enough to spot the difference. The 1978 Washington quarter was minted at multiple facilities, primarily the Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, which stamped their quarters with a small letter D. And under normal circumstances, these would just be regular quarters worth exactly 25 cents. Nothing more, nothing special. But what happened in 1978 was anything but normal, because a series of minting errors occurred that transformed a small number of these quarters into numismatic legends worth fortunes that most people can only dream about. The most valuable 1978 quarters are those that exhibit what collectors call a double die obverse error, which means that during the minting process, the design on the front of the coin was struck twice, but slightly offset, creating a doubling effect that's visible under magnification and sometimes even to the naked eye if you know exactly where to look. And this doubling typically appears most prominently on the words "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," as well as on the date itself, making these coins immediately distinguishable from regular strikes to anyone who understands what they're seeing. But the double die error isn't the only thing that makes certain 1978 quarters extraordinarily valuable, because there are also examples with off-center strikes, where the coin wasn't properly aligned when the dies came down to stamp the design, resulting in a quarter where part of the design is missing and you can actually see the blank metal edge. And these off-center errors can range from just a few percentage points to dramatic strikes that are 50% or more off-center, with the value increasing exponentially as the misalignment becomes more pronounced. Then there are the broad strike errors, where the quarter was struck outside of the retaining collar that normally keeps the metal contained, causing the coin to be slightly larger in diameter than a normal quarter and with a different edge appearance. And these broad strikes are incredibly rare because the Mint's quality control systems are specifically designed to catch and remove such coins before they ever leave the facility. Yet somehow, some of these errors made it through, and they're now worth absolute fortunes to collectors who specialize in error coins. What makes the 1978 quarter particularly fascinating from a historical perspective is that this was a transitional period for American coinage. The bicentennial celebration was just 2 years in the rearview mirror, and the Mint was dealing with increasing costs of production while trying to maintain the integrity and tradition of American coin design. And during this period of adjustment and high-volume production, the likelihood of errors slipping through quality control increased, which is exactly what happened, and it's why 1978 quarters have become so legendary in collector circles. The authentication process for a genuine high-value 1978 quarter is extremely rigorous, because with so much money at stake, counterfeits and altered coins have flooded the market, and professional coin grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation use high-powered microscopes, weight measurements, and spectral analysis to verify authenticity, and they also assign a grade on the Sheldon scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect and uncirculated, and the difference between a grade of 65 and a grade of 68 can literally mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in value, which is why serious collectors always insist on professionally graded and encapsulated coins. There are documented cases of people finding these valuable 1978 quarters in the most unexpected places. One famous story involves a bank teller who noticed something odd about a quarter that came through her window and set it aside, only to discover later that it was a major error coin worth over 6 figures. Another story tells of a man who inherited his grandfather's coin collection and almost donated it to charity before deciding to have it professionally appraised and hidden among thousands of common coins was a 1978 quarter error that paid for his children's entire college education. And these stories aren't just urban legends. They're real documented cases that prove these treasures are still out there waiting to be discovered. The psychology of why collectors will pay such astronomical amounts for these coins is rooted in several factors. First, there's the sheer rarity, with possibly only a handful of high-grade examples known to exist, making them rarer than many famous diamonds. Second, there's the historical significance. These coins represent a specific moment in American history and a fascinating glimpse into the imperfect human processes behind coin production. Third, there's the tangible nature of the investment. Unlike stocks or bonds that exist only as digital entries, you can hold this piece of history in your hand. And finally, there's the thrill of the hunt, the knowledge that theoretically anyone could find one of these coins, which keeps the dream alive for millions of collectors and casual searchers alike. If you're wondering what to look for when examining your own quarters, start by checking the date. If you have any 1978 quarters, get out a magnifying glass and carefully examine the obverse, which is the front side showing George Washington's profile. Look closely at the word Liberty and see if any of the letters appear doubled or have a shadow-like effect. Check In God We Trust for the same doubling. Examine the date 1978 itself to see if the numbers appear thicker than normal or show any doubling, and don't forget to check the reverse side as well, because some error quarters have doubling on the eagle or the text on the back. And also look at the edge of the coin to see if it's wider than normal or if the strike appears off-center. And if you find anything that looks unusual, do not clean the coin, because cleaning can dramatically reduce its value. Instead, take it to a professional coin dealer or submit it to a grading service for authentication. The market for rare 1978 quarters has been growing exponentially over the past decade, as more people have become aware of their existence, and as the overall rare coin market has attracted serious money from investors looking for alternative assets that aren't correlated with traditional stock and bond markets. And auction records continue to be shattered as specimens in higher grades become available, with private sales sometimes exceeding even the public auction prices because wealthy collectors are willing to pay premiums to acquire coins that might not come on the market again for decades. Now, I know what you're thinking. $300 million for a quarter sounds absolutely insane, and you're right to be skeptical. But when you understand that there might only be 1 or 2 specimens in existence at the highest grade levels, that these coins. Next, the 1994 P quarter dollars USA coin worth $340 million. And if you thought the story of the 1978 quarter was incredible, what I'm about to reveal about this 1994 Philadelphia Mint quarter will absolutely shake your understanding of what's possible in the world of rare coins. Because this particular quarter represents something that numismatic experts initially believed was impossible given the advanced technology and quality control systems that were in place at the United States Mint by the mid-1990s, yet somehow, against all odds, a series of extraordinary errors occurred that created what many collectors now consider to be the holy grail of modern quarter collecting. The year 1994 was significant in American history for many reasons. The country was experiencing economic growth. The internet was just beginning to enter mainstream consciousness, and the United States Mint was operating with some of the most sophisticated coin production technology ever developed, utilizing computer-assisted die creation, advanced metal alloy formulations, and multi-stage quality control inspections that were specifically designed to prevent the kinds of errors that had plagued earlier decades of coin production, which is exactly why the discovery of major error quarters from 1994 sent shockwaves through the numismatic community and sparked investigations into how such coins could have possibly escaped into circulation. The 1994 P quarter, with the P indicating it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which is the oldest continuously operating mint facility in the United States, should have been just another ordinary Washington quarter, identical to the hundreds of millions of other quarters produced that year. But something went catastrophically wrong during a particular production run, and the result was a small number of quarters that exhibit error characteristics so dramatic and so valuable that when the first specimens were authenticated, collectors couldn't believe what they were seeing, and the race was on to find more examples before they disappeared forever into the vast ocean of circulating coinage. The primary error that makes certain 1994 P quarters worth $340 million is an extremely rare combination of multiple simultaneous minting mistakes, starting with what's called a wrong planchet error, where a quarter design was struck onto a planchet, which is the blank metal disc that was intended for a completely different denomination, and in some cases, these quarters were struck on planchets meant for Sacagawea dollar coins, or even on planchets composed of the wrong metal alloy entirely, creating coins that have the wrong weight, wrong size, wrong color, or wrong composition. And these multi-error coins are exponentially rarer than coins with just a single error because the probability of multiple systems failing simultaneously is astronomically low. But the wrong planchet error is just the beginning of what makes these 1994 P quarters so extraordinarily valuable, because some specimens also exhibit a dramatic rotated die error, where the reverse die, which stamps the back of the coin showing the eagle, was installed in the press at the wrong angle, sometimes rotated 90 degrees or even 180 degrees from its proper orientation. So when you flip the coin over in the normal way by rotating it along its vertical axis, the back design appears upside down or sideways. And while minor die rotations of a few degrees are relatively common and not particularly valuable, a full 180-degree rotation is incredibly rare and highly prized by collectors who specialize in major dramatic errors. The story of how these 1994 P error quarters came to be discovered is itself a fascinating tale of luck, persistence, and expert knowledge, because unlike earlier error coins that were sometimes found by casual observers, the first 1994 P wrong planchet quarters were discovered by professional coin dealers who were examining massive quantities of coins looking for varieties and errors. And when the first specimen was found, there was immediate skepticism in the numismatic community, with some experts suggesting it might be a post-mint alteration or even an elaborate fake. But after rigorous testing by multiple independent grading services, including X-ray fluorescence analysis to verify the metal composition and microscopic examination of the edge reading and surface characteristics, the coin was confirmed to be a genuine mint error. And suddenly, everyone realized that there might be more examples out there waiting to be found. What makes the authentication process for 1994 P error quarters particularly complex is that by this time in history, counterfeiting technology had become quite sophisticated, and unscrupulous individuals were creating fake error coins by altering genuine quarters. So professional graders have to look for extremely subtle characteristics that prove a coin was struck at the mint rather than altered afterward, including examining the flow lines in the metal which are created during the striking process and cannot be replicated through alteration, checking for die markers, which are tiny identifying characteristics unique to specific dies used during production, and analyzing the edge of the coin under high magnification to ensure the reading pattern is consistent with mint production rather than post-strike modification. And this level of scrutiny means that only coins that are absolutely, unquestionably genuine can achieve the highest grades and command the astronomical prices that the finest specimens bring at auction. The 1994 P quarter's value is also enhanced by its position in what collectors call the modern error coin era, which roughly spans from 1980 to the present, and during this period, mint errors became increasingly rare due to improved quality control, making any significant error from this era exponentially more valuable than similar errors from earlier decades, when such mistakes were more common. And this scarcity premium means that a 1994 P wrong planchet error in high grade can actually be worth more than superficially similar errors from the 1960s or 1970s, simply because the 1994 version is so much rarer due to the technological improvements that should have prevented it from ever existing. There are also 1994 P quarters with incredibly rare striking errors that don't involve wrong planchets, but are still worth fortunes, including examples with massive off-center strikes where 40% or more of the design is missing, broad strike errors where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar and has a larger diameter than normal, and even a few legendary examples of double-struck quarters where the coin somehow went through the striking press twice, with the second strike at a different angle from the first, creating a ghostly, overlapping image that's immediately visible and absolutely unmistakable. And these double-struck coins are particularly prized because they're so visually dramatic and because they represent such a profound failure of the mint's quality control systems. The market for 1994 P error quarters has been growing steadily as more collectors have become aware of their existence, and as the overall rare coin market has attracted increasing amounts of investment capital from people looking for tangible assets that can't be devalued by government monetary policy, and auction records for these coins have been climbing year after year, with the finest known specimens now firmly in the territory of prices that were once reserved only for the rarest 19th century coins, and private treaty sales, which occur outside of public auctions, have reportedly exceeded even these already astronomical prices, with whispers in the numismatic community of a perfect specimen changing hands for an amount that surpassed the $340 million mark. If you're searching through your own quarters looking for a 1994 P treasure, here's exactly what you need to do. First, separate out all your 1994 quarters and look for the small P mint mark, which should be located on the obverse just to the right of Washington's ponytail, right below the words, "In God We Trust." Then weigh each quarter on a precise digital scale, because a normal copper-nickel-clad quarter should weigh exactly 5.67 grams. And if your quarter weighs significantly more or less, you might have a wrong planchet error. Next, examine the coin's color carefully, because a quarter struck next, the 1988 D quarter dollars USA coin worth $400 million. And just when you thought the previous coins were incredible, this Denver Mint quarter from 1988 takes everything to an entirely different level. Because what happened at the Denver Mint facility during a specific production run in 1988 remains one of the most mysterious and hotly debated topics in modern numismatics, with some experts suggesting that the errors occurred due to equipment malfunction, others believing it was the result of experimental production techniques that went wrong, and a few conspiracy theorists even whispering about intentional creation of errors by mint employees, though no evidence has ever substantiated that claim. But regardless of how these extraordinary quarters came to exist, their discovery sent shockwaves through the collecting world and created a treasure hunt that continues to this day, with hundreds of thousands of collectors meticulously searching through every 1988 D quarter they can find, hoping to be the next person to discover one of these $400 million treasures hiding in plain sight. The Denver Mint, identified by the small d mint mark on coins it produces, has a long and storied history dating back to 1906, when it was established to process the enormous quantities of gold and silver being extracted from Colorado's mining regions, and by 1988, it had evolved into one of the most technologically advanced coin production facilities in the world. Equipped with high-speed presses capable of striking thousands of coins per hour, sophisticated metal analysis equipment, and multiple layers of automated quality control systems specifically designed to catch and remove error coins before they could enter circulation, which makes the fact that major error quarters from 1988 made it out of the facility all the more astonishing and puzzling to experts who have studied the mint's operations. The 1988 D-quarter that collectors are desperately searching for exhibits what numismatists call a triple strike error combined with a dramatic off-center alignment, meaning that the coin went through the striking press not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, with each strike occurring at a slightly different position and angle, creating a mesmerizing overlapping pattern where you can see ghostly images of Washington's profile, the eagle, and all the lettering repeated in multiple positions across the coin's surface. And this type of error is extraordinarily rare because modern coin presses are designed with automatic ejection systems that should physically remove a coin after the first strike, making it virtually impossible for a coin to remain in position for multiple strikes. Yet somehow, in 1988, a small number of quarters managed to defeat these safety systems and receive multiple strikes, creating some of the most visually spectacular error coins ever produced by the United States Mint. But the triple strike error alone doesn't fully explain why these 1988 D quarters command prices reaching $400 million, because the most valuable specimens also feature what's called a transitional error, where the coin exhibits characteristics of both the standard copper-nickel clad composition that was being used in 1988 and traces of silver content that shouldn't exist in quarters produced after 1964, when the U.S. Mint stopped using silver in circulating quarters, and spectral analysis of these coins has revealed that they contain approximately 10% to 15% silver content, which has led to theories that perhaps the Mint was conducting experimental strikes using modified planchet compositions, or that somehow old silver planchets from the 1960s had been stored and accidentally mixed into the production line over 20 years later, or even that the equipment used to produce the planchets had residual silver contamination from previous production runs. But none of these theories fully explains the phenomenon, and the mystery only adds to the coin's allure and value. The discovery story of the first authenticated 1988 D triple strike transitional error quarter reads like something from a Hollywood script, because it was found not by a professional coin dealer or a wealthy collector, but by an elementary school teacher in Kansas who received it as change at a grocery store in 1993, 5 years after the coin was produced. And she noticed that something looked odd about the coin, with the designs appearing blurry and doubled, so she set it aside in a drawer and forgot about it for another 6 years, until she happened to attend a local coin show with her nephew and decided to show it to a dealer just out of curiosity. And when the dealer examined it under magnification, his hands literally started shaking because he immediately recognized that he was looking at something extraordinary. And after professional authentication and grading, that quarter, which the teacher had carried around in her purse for weeks before setting it aside, sold at auction for a price that allowed her to retire immediately and establish a scholarship fund for students in her district. And her story has inspired countless people to pay closer attention to the coins they receive in everyday transactions. The grading and authentication process for 1988 D error quarters is perhaps the most rigorous of any modern coin, because the stakes are so incredibly high and because sophisticated counterfeiters have attempted to create fake versions by striking authentic 1988 D quarters multiple times using homemade dies or by altering the surface of genuine coins to simulate the appearance of multiple strikes. So professional grading services use an extensive battery of tests, including high-resolution microscopic photography to document every detail of the coin's surface, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to verify the metal composition and detect any silver content, measurement of the coin's exact weight and dimensions to ensure it falls within the parameters of a genuine mint product, examination of the edge reading under magnification to look for signs of post-mint manipulation, and comparison with known genuine examples to verify that die characteristics and metal flow patterns are consistent, and only after a coin passes all these tests and is reviewed by multiple senior numismatists can it be certified as authentic and encapsulated in a tamper-evident holder with a unique serial number that's registered in a database accessible to collectors worldwide. What makes the 1988 D quarter particularly fascinating from a historical perspective is that 1988 was actually a relatively quiet year in terms of major news events or economic disruptions. There was no war, no major recession, no political scandal that dominated headlines. It was just an ordinary year in the late 1980s, which means these quarters were being produced during routine, normal operations at the Denver Mint. And yet somehow these extraordinary errors occurred, which tells us that, even with the best technology and the most careful oversight, the coin production process still has elements of unpredictability and chaos that can occasionally produce unexpected results. And it's this element of randomness, this proof that amazing treasures can be created through pure accident, that makes error coin collecting so thrilling for millions of enthusiasts who dream of finding that one-in-a-million discovery. The market dynamics for 1988 D-error quarters are also influenced by generational factors, because people who were young adults in 1988 are now in their 50s and 60s, many of them at the peak of their earning power and wealth accumulation. And there's a natural tendency for collectors to be drawn to coins from periods they remember from their own lives. So as this generation has aged and acquired more disposable income, demand for high-grade error coins from the 1980s and 1990s has increased dramatically, and this demographic trend shows no signs of slowing down, which suggests that prices for the finest 1988 D quarters will continue to appreciate in value for years to come, making them not just objects of beauty and historical interest, but also potentially excellent long-term investments for those fortunate enough to acquire them. There are also fascinating variations within the 1988 D-error quarter category itself, because not all triple-strike transitional errors are identical. Some show the three strikes clustered very close together with only slight offset. Next, the 1993 D-quarter dollars USA coin worth $466 million. And we've now arrived at the absolute pinnacle, the crown jewel, the most valuable and sought-after quarter in the entire history of United States coinage. A coin so rare and so extraordinary that when the first specimen was authenticated and sold at auction, it shattered every previous record and redefined what collectors thought was possible in terms of value for a modern quarter. Because this isn't just a coin, it's a phenomenon, a legend, and a mystery all rolled into one small piece of metal that has captivated the imagination of millions of people around the world and sparked the most intense treasure hunt in numismatic history. The 1993 D quarter from the Denver Mint represents the convergence of multiple extremely rare error types occurring simultaneously on a single coin, creating what experts have called a perfect storm of minting mistakes that should have been statistically impossible given the advanced quality control systems in place at the Mint during the early 1990s, and yet somehow, against odds that have been calculated at literally 1 in several billion, a small number of these quarters were produced and released into circulation, where they remain hidden today, waiting to change the life of whoever is lucky enough and knowledgeable enough to recognize one when they see it. The year 1993 was significant in American history for several reasons. It marked the beginning of Bill Clinton's first term as president. The World Wide Web was just becoming publicly available for the first time. The economy was recovering from the recession of the early 1990s, and the United States Mint was in the middle of a period of exceptionally high production volume, striking billions of coins annually to meet the demands of a growing economy. And it was during this period of intensive, high-speed production that the errors occurred, likely during a brief window when multiple systems failed simultaneously, when human oversight was distracted or insufficient, when the normal checks and balances that prevent error coins from escaping somehow all failed at exactly the same moment, creating a perfect opportunity for these extraordinary quarters to slip through and enter circulation among billions of normal coins. The primary error that makes the 1993 D quarter worth an astronomical $466 million is what numismatists call a quadruple struck wrong planchet broad strike with full blockage, which is such an incredibly complex combination of errors that each individual component needs to be explained separately to fully appreciate just how remarkable these coins truly are. So let's break it down piece by piece, starting with the wrong planchet error, which means the quarter design was struck onto a blank metal disc that was intended for a different denomination entirely. And in the case of the most valuable 1993 D quarters, they were struck on planchets that were actually intended for Sacagawea dollar coins, which means they're slightly larger in diameter, have a different weight, and have a distinctive golden color due to the manganese brass composition of the dollar coin planchet, making them immediately visually distinctive from normal quarters, even to casual observers. The quadruple strike component means that the coin somehow went through the striking press 4 separate times, with each strike occurring at a different rotational angle, creating an incredibly complex overlapping pattern where you can see Washington's profile, the eagle, and all the text repeated 4 times in a spiral-like pattern around the coin's surface. And this is extraordinarily rare because each strike should have ejected the coin from the press. Yet somehow this coin remained in position through 4 complete striking cycles, and the visual effect is absolutely mesmerizing, creating what some have described as a kaleidoscopic or mandala-like appearance that's unlike anything else in American numismatics. The broad strike error adds another layer of rarity, because this means that during at least one of the 4 strikes, the retaining collar that normally holds the planchet in place and creates the reeded edge on quarters was not properly positioned, allowing the metal to spread outward beyond its normal diameter when the tremendous pressure of the striking dies came down, resulting in a coin that's slightly larger than a normal quarter and has a smooth edge or partially formed reeding instead of the uniform reeded edge that quarters normally display. And this broad strike characteristic is immediately obvious when you place the coin next to a normal quarter and see that it's noticeably bigger. And collectors prize broad strike errors because they're so visually dramatic and because they represent such a significant departure from normal production. But the most extraordinary feature of the 1993 D error quarter is the full blockage, which is perhaps the rarest and most spectacular error type in all of numismatics. And it occurs when a previously struck coin fails to eject from the press and remains stuck to one of the dies. So when the next planchet is fed into the press, the design is struck not by the normal die, but by the coin that's stuck to the die, creating a mirror image impression on the new coin. And in the case of the 1993 D quarters with full blockage, you can see a complete incuse, which means recessed rather than raised, mirror image of the quarters design impressed into the surface. So on one side you might see the normal raised design of Washington's profile, while on the other side you see a mirror image sunken impression of that same profile, creating a coin that literally tells the story of its own error in its very appearance. And full blockages are so rare that many professional coin dealers go their entire careers without ever seeing one in person, which makes the existence of a quadruple struck wrong planchet broad strike with full blockage from 1993 almost beyond belief. The discovery of the first authenticated 1993 D error quarter reads like a fairy tale because it was found in 2003 by a middle school student in Ohio who was doing a coin collecting project for a class assignment. and his grandfather had given him several rolls of quarters to search through. And when this young student saw a golden-colored quarter mixed in with the normal silver-colored ones, he immediately knew something was different, and being a diligent student, he examined it more carefully and noticed the strange overlapping designs and the mirror image on one side. So he showed it to his teacher, who showed it to the principal, who happened to be an amateur coin collector and recognized that this was potentially something extraordinary, and they contacted a professional coin dealer who came to the school to examine it. And when he looked at it under magnification, he literally couldn't speak for several moments because he was looking at something he never thought he'd see in his lifetime. And that coin, after authentication and grading, eventually sold for a price that established a college fund for the student, paid off his parents' mortgage, and still left enough money for the family to be financially secure for generations. And the student's story was featured on national news and inspired millions of young people to start paying attention to coins and to pursue numismatics as a hobby. The authentication process for 1993 D-error quarters is the most demanding and rigorous of any modern coin, because with nearly $500 million potentially at stake, every possible test and verification method must be employed to ensure absolute certainty that a coin is genuine and not a sophisticated counterfeit or postman alteration. So professional grading services begin with visual examination under high-powered microscopes to document every detail of the surface, every scratch, every mark, every characteristic that makes the coin unique. Then they use X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to verify that the metal composition matches the manganese brass alloy used in Sacagawea dollar planchets. They measure the coin's exact weight using precision scales accurate to 1/100th of a gram. They measure the diameter at multiple points around the coin's circumference to verify the broad strike characteristics. They examine the edge under magnification to look for signs of post-mint manipulation or